Hi, everyone. Welcome. Great. Okay, so it looks like people are still hopping on, but I will go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, to Unapologetically Progressive Pride. I'm Liliana Martinez, Senior Political Manager at Run for Something. Here at Run for Something, we've built a program with two major focuses: recruitment and support of young progressives to run for local office. Since Run for Something was founded in 2017, more than 75,000 people have raised their hands to run for office. We've been able to recruit this many people by hosting events like this, running ads encouraging people to run, and we've even created our own holiday, National Run for Office Day, which encourages people who may not know that they have what it takes to hold an elected position. We support the Run for Something community by asking people to sign up, provide one-on-one calls with our dedicated staff and volunteers, work with partners, and also connecting new candidates to as many resources to jumpstart their campaigns as possible. Run for Something has elected over 104 LGBTQIA progressive leaders to office, including California State Assembly Member Alex Lee, Delaware State Senator Sarah McBride, Georgia State Senator Kim Jackson, Nebraska State Senator Megan Hutt, and Pennsylvania State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta, and those are just a few. With the power they've won, they're passing laws to protect people against discrimination and hate, like Virginia Delegate Danica Rome and Colorado Representative Brianna Titone passing bans on the gay trans panic defense. And they're bringing their authentic selves to our body politics and demanding progress in the face of prejudice. One note about the 75,000 people who've signed up with Run for Something: nearly 11,000 of those people have come during 2021 alone, and that number is more than all of the signups that we've had since 2017. This year, we've endorsed 140 candidates, mostly women, mostly people of color, across 16 states, and 85% of those endorsements are for local office. All of this has allowed us to, in total, since 2017, endorse more than 1,500 people and elect nearly 500. 55% of those are women, 56% BIPOC, 21% LGBTQIA, and that's across 45 states in total. So in many ways, the work at Run for Something is just getting started. We won't change our mission because we have a brand new pool of people counting on us, and that number grows every day. We're really excited for tonight's conversation. And just before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. For everyone on Zoom, please make sure to change your settings to all panelists and attendees and introduce yourself in the chat. Use the Q&A function to ask questions of any of our panelists. And we'd also like to give a special thanks to our National Host Committee for making events like this possible. And a special thank you to our event sponsors: AFSCME, Precision Strategies, Authentic Campaigns, Emily's List, Civis Analytics, Amalgamated Bank, Avalanche Insights, and NewCo. So this month, we've been celebrating Pride all June. We're excited to cap this month off by giving you a chance to hear from a group of dedicated LGBTQIA+ leaders. And I'm very excited to introduce the first speaker for tonight. Dr. Tyler Titus is one of our groundbreaking Run for Something candidates in 2021 as a candidate for Erie County Executive. They are a licensed professional counselor in the state of Pennsylvania, a trauma-informed leader, public speaker, and activist. They have served on the board of directors for the Crime Victim Center. Dr. Titus currently serves as president on the Erie City School Board in Erie, Pennsylvania, and is the co-vice chair for the Pennsylvania Commission of LGBTQ+ Affairs. Tyler is married to Shraddha Prabhu, an assistant professor at Edinburgh University, and is the proud parent of two phenomenal children. Most recently, Tyler won the Democratic primary in Erie County, and if they are victorious in November, they will become the first openly trans person in U.S. history to be elected as a county executive. I'm truly so excited to present Tyler tonight. Every time I have an opportunity to see them on the campaign trail, it is a pleasure. Tyler, welcome. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much. What a great introduction, right? You kind of did my stump speech for me. So you took so much pressure off of me. I'm so grateful. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here, even more excited that I get to serve as the moderator tonight. We're going to have some great discussion with some really inspiring candidates that we have a lot to learn from, myself included. And it's very humbling to even be in the presence of those that we're going to be talking to tonight and hearing from. Like like Liliana had said, I am running for Erie County Executive. This would, when we win in November, this would make me the highest ranking openly transgender executive in our nation's history. Currently, right now, I'm one of 9 non-binary people sitting in office. This is a space, that's new for many of us, and we're all learning as this goes. But I think the critical point tonight, and what you're going to hear over and over and over again, is that representation matters. Queer people belong in every level of government. And the people we're going to hear from tonight are going to talk to you about the amazing accomplishments and the things that they cannot wait to get done when they get to serve and represent their communities. Without further ado, I would love to now introduce our first panelist, Christopher Coburn, who's a candidate for Bozeman City Commission in Montana. Christopher, if elected, you will be the first queer Black candidate elected in Montana history. What does breaking that barrier mean to you and to your community?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for the question, and thank you for everyone for being here and for this space tonight. I'm really excited. So for me, just the prospect of being the first out queer Black person elected to office in Montana it means a great deal to both me and the community that I'm working so hard to authentically represent. The truth is that because I'm from Montana, I've often been the first queer Black person to do something in the spaces that I occupy. But so it feels really comfortable in that way. It feels very sort of familiar in that way. But the weight of this office and the weight of having this type of representation for Montana means a lot, and I'm really excited about this whole process.
Thank you so much. And I think, you steered it so well that you are often the first. And so I'm excited to see what you bring to this chat tonight and that we can all learn from. So thank you so much for being here. Without further ado, we'll introduce our next panelist, Nick Kaur. Nick is a candidate for Minneapolis City Council, Ward 7. Nick, you're also looking to make history as the first out queer Asian American member of Minneapolis City Council, a city now synonymous with racial injustice after the tragic murder of George Floyd last year. How has the community changed in the past year, and how does that help or hurt your campaign?
Thank you. Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Nick Kaur. I use he, him, his pronouns. Yeah, that is a really great question. As everyone knows, George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis, and a global uprising was started because of that. And here in Minneapolis, things have not changed. Just be very clear about that. Things have not changed in terms of policing, in terms of how we do public safety. Nothing has changed. And so the entire world continues to watch Minneapolis. And here on the ballot this year, in November, in addition to my election and the city council election, is a vote for the voters to change the city charter that would remove the requirement for police officers in our city. It would also create a new Department of Public Safety that includes other aspects of public safety. And so that is sort of like the lay of the land right now in Minneapolis, is that like there is that conversation is happening in the entire city. And it's very, very clear that there are many people who are voting with hope, many people who are voting with a new vision and voting with their values around like really thinking differently about how we create public safety and how we do public safety in our city. And it's very clear that there are a lot of people who are voting in fear. There are a lot of people who are turning out because they want more police. There are a lot of people who are turning out because they are scared right now with the rising crime, and that fear is totally valid. But that is sort of the dynamics of the race right now, and it's our job. It's our job as folks who are running for office to continue to talk to people about our values and inspire them about what our future can look like, and to dig into that hope and not into that fear, because like we know that what we have and what we've had doesn't work, right? Like we just know that. And so we have to continue to remind people of like how we got here in the first place. We got here because Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin like kneeled on George Floyd's neck for over 8 minutes, and the entire world watched. And so we have to continue to remind people that like that's how we got here, and that like we have to change things so that they're better.
Nick, that was incredibly powerful, you know, and especially coming forward with so much rawness and intensity, and your healing as well. And so to stand up and to represent your community while you're amidst the chaos and living it every day, I think is really admirable. So thank you for everything that you're bringing. And the other great point you made is that sometimes change brings out the worst, and that shows up in fear. And those of us who are standing up have to keep fighting this together so that we can make true change happen. So thank you. The next panelist that we're going to talk to and introduce to tonight is Andrew Grant Houston, candidate for Seattle mayor. Andrew, welcome. Andrew, you are fighting for affordable housing, an issue that not only highlights the disparity of affordable and safe housing for the Black and Brown communities, but also the LGBTQIA+ community. What is your plan to protect our vulnerable communities that are disproportionately affected by this housing crisis? Oh, we got to get you.
There we go. Good evening to everybody. My name is Andrew Grant Houston, or I go by Ace for short. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm an architect. And so that is what I really bring to this conversation, and why I differ myself from a lot of the other candidates that are running is really recognizing the system that we're operating in. In the city of Seattle, we have agreed to allow for some housing to happen, but it's really been focused on historically Black and Brown communities, as well as Capitol Hill, which is the historical neighborhood. And so gentrification and displacement has happened for many years. And I've seen even some of my favorite bars shut down during the pandemic, not because they couldn't afford to continue having their lease, but because that space is going to be redeveloped into housing. And so what I'm really focused on is two things. One is we already know that we're a city that's going to continue to grow for many decades. And so we need to allow for housing in other areas of the city, namely the places that are whiter and wealthier and are only single family homes right now, reversing the exclusionary zoning that has happened in a lot of cities across the US, but then also making those deep investments in affordable housing in our communities of color and on Capitol Hill, so that it doesn't matter what your income is, and especially as queer and trans people who not just want to be professionals, but also want to be artists and want to serve the community in other ways that don't necessarily pay well. We have just a right as anyone else to be able to afford to live in our communities.
I mean, I don't even know what to say as a follow-up for that, right? I mean, this is a fundamental human need, safe, affordable housing. And so I'm so glad that you're here and you're bringing up, that's what a wonderful issue that often gets overlooked, or people don't understand all the nuances around it. So I'm excited to learn more from you about this and how we can support you and you creating this change that is so very, very long overdue.
Thank you.
Next, we will introduce Liliana, candidate for Atlanta City Council, District 5. Liliana, another history maker on the panel tonight. I'm seeing a big trend here. But Liliana, let's correct that, when elected, you will be the first out queer Muslim elected in Georgia history. What is your #1 priority to create safer spaces for refugees, for Muslims, and for the queer community, and all of the people you have been tirelessly advocating for in your district?
Oh God, that's a loaded question.
Right, it is. So take it apart in pieces.
I mean, it's multifaceted, right? There's not like one key thing to do. It's a number of things. I mean, there's being hyper-local, there's the opportunity to have the resources to do on the ground work that so many of us do as people who work in social justice. So this is like, so there's the opportunity to continue actual outreach, meeting our most vulnerable populations where they are at their door, and just doing that ground level work to educate them on what's going on, to make sure that they are aware of the resources that are available to them, to make sure that I'm conducting field and off years, not just during election years, to understand the pulse of the city and in the neighborhoods, to understand what's actually going on. Then there's things like workforce development, in which Atlanta focuses. They don't focus on it. It just doesn't happen. There's no, there are plenty of unions. There are plenty of apprenticeship programs. The city does not partner with unions or other organizations or other organizing chapters on. And that's the highest rate of return anybody can, any entity can invest in a city. And then of course, there's the piece of affordable housing, where Atlanta is 3 to 5 years out from becoming the next San Francisco, minus the transit. And then, you know, I think we just had an article broken yesterday that we are the worst city to live in on minimum wage. So to ensure that the most underrepresented and under-resourced populations actually have a seat at the table, it means having come from that experience. So it's giving those people the opportunity to speak, to have their voices heard. So I've been homeless, I've been mugged, I have been assaulted, I've been the victim of, I've experienced xenophobia, homophobia, Islamophobia. I mean, the list goes on. And so having that background gives me the opportunity to shape more holistic legislation, because in my opinion, legislation is based on subjective experiences. But it also gives me the opportunity to continue learning to the people that I already work with, because humanity happens when you listen, and our leaders don't do a very good job of listening to the people who aren't the loudest in the room. And typically, if you're the loudest, that equals you being the most privileged, because you have the time to attend neighborhood meetings. You have the time to hop on a Zoom. You have the time to drive to whatever event is happening. If you're on a fixed income, if you're a single parent, if you're in school, if you're working 3 or 4 or 5 jobs, like, you don't have that opportunity. And a long time ago, public servants forgot that it was their job to meet people where they were, to meet the most under-resourced people where they are, instead of expecting them to come to the city, to come to their legislator. That's not the way politics should work. It lacks a certain sense of humanity. And so those are the things that I hope to change and intend on changing, intend on being a very loud advocate for, moving forward in this race when I win the seat.
Liliana, that was inspiring. And that was like a beautiful intro to our and a segue into our next questions. And if you don't mind, since you're already unmuted and you started to kind of lead into this question, I'm going to go ahead and then pitch this one and see if you wouldn't mind taking a stab at it first. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like there is more pressure on you to represent the LGBTQI plus community, especially in today's climate, as a candidate? And what challenges do you think you face that your counterparts don't?
I mean, is there more pressure? In some ways, yes, because I would be the only advocate for LGBTQIA plus rights. Our city has done no trans housing protections, and it's currently sitting on $96 million that could go towards assisting communities living with HIV and AIDS, or that are susceptible to, and it's currently a pandemic in the city. So yes, is there pressure to be a voice to that cause, to be a voice to our community? Definitely. But at the same time, there's also an extraordinary community here to help me not shoulder that burden by myself as the lone elected legislator. And the burden, what was the second part of that question? What is the burden that I share that my counterparts wouldn't?
Yes. Yeah, you got it. You remembered it. Yes.
I'm gay. So there's that one. Also shifting into, going through my journey into becoming non-binary, and helping my partner shift into their journey of also becoming non-binary. So there's a lot to that. Some of it, a lot of it emotional, some of it physical. And the fact of the matter is, people in queer spaces, I'm not going to sit here and talk about shortcoming anyone's trauma. We all have it. Life is not easy. Everyone's a survivor of something, especially if you've made it this far, and especially in this world. Any of us who've lived through 2020 can say that. But the other piece of it is that if you are a minority, you don't come from that background without having pretty extraordinary levels of trauma. And being minorities, none of us can afford the ability that cis white men have. And for that, we just can't. People ask me all the time why I'm so open about my past. I can't afford not to be. Otherwise, heteronormative culture would weaponize my trauma against me. So those are the burdens we have to share. Like, it's constantly being aware of my emotional state, regulate, like, self-care, having to emotionally regulate, having to be aware of what my triggers are, having to be aware of what makes me uncomfortable in a space, knowing what my boundaries are, continuously enforcing them. Otherwise, I will get bulldozed in this. That's the reality of being somebody who comes from trauma, being a minority in these spaces. It's great that we're talking about like our sexual and gender identities, that things are more fluid now, and that we talk about that more openly. We tend to romanticize it, but it doesn't come without an extraordinary level of challenges. And it's still in many ways very, very dangerous, emotionally and physically.
Yeah. You made so many incredibly valid points there. As somebody with a trauma history background, training as a therapist, and going into that, I really connect and resonate with what you're saying here, just about oftentimes those of us who are in marginalized or oppressed communities are expected to present in very specific ways, and not being allowed to ever allow the harm that's been done to us come to the surface, and always have this candor and this poise that many of our counterparts who are not within those intersections do not have to also navigate through. And with that, I would love to, any of the other panelists, anything else you would like to add to this question? This is a powerful one. And I can go back to it, but just, what challenges do you face that your counterparts don't?
I'll hop in if I could, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Tyler, I think, when I was thinking about this question, and everything that I just heard really, yes, I sort of was like over here in my apartment, just like clapping my hands. I'm like, yes, that's so true and so real. And for me, one thing that's been surprising about the campaign so far is that even if I post a picture of me and my partner to my Instagram, so there are some people who will accuse me or sort of think that I'm in some way using my queerness to get people to vote for me. And so this whole notion that who I am is already political for so many reasons. And I look to some of my cis straight white candidates who don't have the same sort of pressure, the same sort of and that doesn't stop me from being who I am and being authentic and showing parts of my life that I think you need to be able to show and share and live to be an authentic human who is trying to just do better for the spaces that they occupy. But it was a little bit surprising to me that I was like, oh, this is just something I'm going to have to sort of navigate, one more layer of the complexities that is running for office while being queer and Black. And I'm not often surprised by those other barriers that come up, with those other moments of critique, but that was one that I was like, oh, this is going to be one of those moments that cis straight white folks don't have to experience.
Yeah, wow. These answers, like, I'm kind of in awe over here, just like listening. I'm like, yes, just to be in community with other candidates who understand and can relate to this as well. Nick or Andrew, was there anything that either of you wanted to add to this?
So I appreciate what Liliana and Christopher have said. I'm running in a ward where there are a lot of LGBTQ people. A lot of them are whiter and cis and older and wealthier. And a lot of them also support my opponent. And so I think it's a very interesting dynamic that is created when you have a young queer person of color running a more progressive race against something that a lot of older cis gay wealthier men, it challenges pieces of their lives. And so I think that to me has been a challenge in a little bit of a way where people are, it makes me think about what it means to be queer and LGBTQ in, our current society where it's it's almost like cool to be gay now in many places around the United States. And at the same time, like many of us do not remember or recognize like where our histories come from, and like recognize that like our fight for like our own livelihoods came from the movement started as a movement against the police, and that is like we like inherent to like our fight and our movement. And so I see it as my job to continue to talk about that with people, because like many of us have forgotten, or many of us didn't even know that. You know what I mean? And so like that's something that I think about a lot, is like how are we connecting our histories to what's happening today? Because it is so tied and so connected. And how are we making sure that like Twin Cities Pride, which is in my ward, like there's nothing about the history of like the LGBTQ movement, and there's just like corporations everywhere that are like trying to like sell their thing to people. But like it's like why don't we like take the time to like educate people about who we are and where we come from, and like what it actually means to fight for like queer liberation. Like that's like the thing that I want to continue to have conversations about.
Yeah.
So deep, so very deep. And if you don't mind, Andrew, I want to pivot a little bit, and I want to like launch you into this next question.
All right.
I'm very curious, and I want you to take the lead on this. So this past year has been undoubtedly and extremely challenging, particularly for the queer community. There's a lot of barriers that we faced, especially, this going back into isolation and this almost feeling reminiscent of being back in the closet for many of us and being cut off from our support systems. How have you stayed motivated, and what kind of pushed you to not only during this hard time to then go step up to represent?
So I think for myself, it was interesting to be isolated because I'm a high-risk individual. And so I essentially did not leave my apartment for weeks at a time from roughly the beginning of March of last year until I was fully vaccinated, so May of this year. And what that meant was, in some ways, I felt safe because I had grown up in Texas where it was extremely hot and I wasn't allowed to play outside. And so kind of that sense of just having to be inside all the time was something that I felt a bit normal. But in many ways, I was connected to my community online. And given how many protests were happening here and actually near where I live, I could actually hear that. And I felt that I had to get involved. And so I did a lot of communication through Twitter, reporting on the protests as they were happening. Also doing a lot of coordination for mutual aid for people who needed it, and not just for people who are protesting, but also those who are currently unhoused. Most people don't know this about Seattle, but we are the 18th largest city in terms of population, and we have the 3rd largest homeless population of any city in the US. And so this is a crisis that has been happening for a very long time, and it only got worse with the pandemic. And it was really during our wildfire season where the city just lacked a response to actually bring people who are outside inside, just giving them some sense of protection. And that's when I knew I had to step up. It was something where I could not accept that we didn't have the resources for these people, especially in a city that is seen as this progressive tech hub with all this money.
You all continue to, and I keep forgetting that I'm the moderator. I'm getting lost in the answers. There's so much depth and knowledge in the answers that you all are providing. So I'm so very grateful that I get to be here. But then I'm like, oh, snap back! You got to ask the next question. But I want to pose this over to you all as well, who didn't get to answer. What has kept you motivated through this incredibly difficult time that we're still trying to get our way out of?
It's just like this is a free for all. So what kept us motivated, or what kept me motivated? I mean, I think one of the things that we don't discuss often enough is definitely mental health and like what we suffer from. So like I have CPTSD. So like it's just not something we talk about. And so, and it's not discussed. It's stigmatized. I was told if I spoke about it that my opponents would use it against me, to which I said, go right ahead. I can't wait to use that as my hit piece on my mailer. So I think one of the things for me that has kept me going is the door-to-door piece of like the human connection of actually talking to people who haven't had anyone speak to them or show them any type of attention or give them the opportunity to tell their story. I mean, I think that is one of the major pieces of it. That for me, like the people that I know that I am fighting to represent and getting to actually talk to them. Whereas when I knock on someone who is affluent, their first question is like, what are you going to do for me? Versus when I talk to somebody who is a legacy resident or who might be experiencing some sort of disability or mental illness or is on a fixed income or is a person of color. Every single time it's thank you. It's just the immense gratitude, the kindness, the desire to have a conversation, and the excitement that somebody cares, I think is the biggest thing. I think it's getting to defeat apathy. Because when people ask me what my biggest obstacle is, I always say apathy. It's not another opponent. It's not anything else. It's apathy. And humanity happens when you listen. So I think that's like my big driver is I learned a long time ago that a person's story is probably one of the most vulnerable things they could choose to share with you. So getting to do that, I mean, I'm doing a lot of communication. My life is monopolized by this race. So, I kind of feel like a cult follower of my own campaign, but the fact is like the opportunity to hear those folks, it brings me back to center every single time.
That one, I mean, your answer just resonated so much, especially your last part, right? To run like a truly
where I'm like cult follower of my own campaign.
Yes, I relate. But you do, like, it becomes like you eat, breathe the campaign, and like you go to bed thinking about like, did I at least a good candidate, right? A good candidate. Did I get to everybody I needed to get to? Who did I miss? Who do I need to connect with? And constantly, like, or maybe that's my ADHD brain, but I see head nodding, so I feel so much less alone here when I'm saying that. But thank you for bringing that. I mean, it truly does resonate, I think, with many of us, especially just the motivation of connecting, those stories, those lived experiences, people trusting us with their story, and to then take that and put it into change. Go do something to break down some of these barriers, right? To go take the harm that I have faced, and I'm trusting you as my representative in whatever capacity to fix it, to help me elevate, help me with the power that we're vesting in you to do something. So thank you for sharing that. Chris, I saw you come off of mute there.
Yeah, thank you. I think for me, I share a lot of those same thoughts and feelings about the campaign. First of all, like my partner, we just had our 2-year wedding anniversary, and I was like, I have from noon until 2 for lunch, and then I have to get right back to it. And they understood. But I think for me, what's kept me going throughout this past year is that I've was able to serve on our county board of health, and I've been on the board of health for 3 years now, so well before the pandemic. And in Montana, the way our public health system, or I guess I'll say like lack of public health system, really operates is county by county, and there's these boards of health that are appointed, and I was a county appointee to that board. And so during the pandemic, I got to feel really, or we're still in the pandemic, I don't mean to say it that way, but in the height of the pandemic, I really was called upon to serve and to make sure that I was making sort of hard decisions that were going to protect the community that I love. And it was a lot of these moments where I was reminded about the way that you can either promote equity or perpetuate inequity with every decision you make when you're making policy level decisions that impact your entire population in your county or your community. And so I felt really a lot of gratitude that I was trusted to do that. And that really did propel me into wanting to run for office, because I was like, this is a way that when we're talking about how we're closing things down during the pandemic, or how we're going to, offer testing. And then when we talked about how are we going to prioritize who gets COVID vaccines first, all of those things, all of those really important decisions, if you don't have policymakers or decision makers at the table saying, hey, we need to do this in a way that's going to correct inequities, then that's how they get perpetuated. So I think for me during this pandemic, I just worked really hard. We all worked really hard, but the way I got to work really hard was serving the community in the way that the current time was calling for, because of the sort of health implications of this pandemic. So I think now that we're on the sort of, at least in my community, we have really good vaccine uptake. I mean, I say really good, it's not that good compared to the rest of the country, but for Montana, it's actually pretty decent. And so now that we're able to move into these spaces where we can bring people together and bring community together, that's really been powerful. And I think just a really important time to be campaigning, because this campaign can serve a couple functions. It serves as a way for me to connect people, talk about things that I really care about, that I know that our community really cares about. But it's an opportunity to really bring people back together for sometimes for the very first time for over a year. And just like the sort of energy that comes out of that opportunity is amazing. And so that's what's been, in this current moment, really been propelling me and keeping me moving.
I think that, you the couple points that I really want to highlight there. The one that really hit me was that we can either be advocating and creating equity, or we can be perpetuating inequity. And I think that that's really critical that we keep that we and we all know that's why we're here, right? That equity is not an hour training, that it literally has to be the way in which we function, in which we assess all areas in which we are, either legislating or advocating or creating change for. So thank you for that. Absolutely. And Nick, you had, I'm going to lean back into your one answer that you just gave a little bit ago, really talked about how we've kind of lost sight of history of our community, and really where it kind of all started. So I would love for you to share maybe either one of your favorite icons or a piece of history that inspires you, that motivates you, that empowers you, especially at your most difficult moments. So who's somebody within our queer history that you really look to?
I was thinking a little bit about that, and I think a bit about the people in the Twin Cities area that have been leading on the ground, doing this work for a long time. So I think people like my friend Roxanne Anderson, who's been sort of just building deep roots in communities of color, in queer communities of color for a very, very long time, and has just done so much change for our communities. And then just my friends and family, that my queer friends and family that continue to, they're the ones that inspire me the most, because I sort of just see what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, and I see sort of the everyday courage that it takes to be yourself in the world. And I think the other thing I'll say is that I don't think that there are enough queer and trans mentors in our community, and who I would be, want to look towards as a young person. And so I just think that we need more of those everywhere.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And as I ask this question, people that come to my mind is immediately those who hold those intersectional spaces, right? Those are the queer leaders that I hope to get elevated. And when I think of that, I can't help but think of Shia Diamond. I don't know if you all know her. If not, you're totally missing out, and you need to be leaning into her music. She's brilliant. She's phenomenal. She sings all my pump songs. Whenever I'm prepping for a debate, I turn Shia Diamond on. There's my secret sauce. You can have it, use it however you want to. But she's got some great pump songs. But how about you all, Andrew, Christopher, Liliana, queer icons, people who you look to draw that inspiration or that motivation from?
Is this another free for all? Okay.
It's
All
the
right.
only
Yeah.
queer way, right? We just go. I put a question, like, boom, grab it. So
I mean, speaking to what like Nick said, like mine's also more hyper local. Simone Bell was, I think, the one of the first Black gay woman, I think, elected to our state legislature. First, I think, gay person ever. But Simone was a very big activist. I feel like one time someone said she even brought like a spear into like session for discussion, a point she was going to make at one point. But before Simone, no, she came from, marching in the streets, very grassroots, huge organizer, huge advocate. And before her, there were really no protest, like none of us would go inside of the Capitol. Any of us in those spaces, we would never go inside of the Capitol. No queer people, no activists, no organizers, no nothing. And she said I remember her saying one of the first things she realized when she was inside of the Capitol was that they couldn't hear anything that was happening outside. And so the first thing she did was work to move everyone into the building, to get them in there, to see what was happening, to start becoming more engaged. And it completely shaped and reshifted the culture of how we interacted at the state level. Because of Simone, we are not afraid of going in and asking for what we want, for what we need. We're not afraid to go and remember that is very much our house. And due to that, because she opened that door for us, that has opened up so many more doors, because Simone gave way to, well, people like me, but she also gave way to Park Cannon, who came up behind her. And Park, if you guys watch the news, she was the young Black queer woman who knocked on Governor Kemp's door when he was signing the voter suppression bill under the plantation photo, because, idiot. So like, I'm sorry I don't have a more graceful word for that, but she just simply knocked on the door and was dragged away, arrested, like messed up rotator. I mean, the whole nine. Park and I go way back, and if Simone had never run, she would never have been able to pick Park. Park never would have paved the way for the rest of us. And if it hadn't been for the two of them, I wouldn't be sitting here, because Park was when I first ran, Park was the first person to believe in me and give me a whole team. And she was also the first Black queer person ever elected at the Capitol at the age of 23, 24 years old. And she receives death threats on the regular for our community. When people were in the Capitol fighting against voter suppression and were about to be grabbed and arrested by Capitol Police, she literally put her body between them and protesters to distract them, so those Black women could get out of the building safely, and then proceeded to do a sit-in on the stairs, and then received death threats. And then shortly thereafter, was arrested by police for simply knocking on a door. And then they attempted to charge her with 2 felony charges that were completely false, but she wasn't able to sleep in the same house for more than one night in a row, all because of what she did for us. And it's those people, like, it's I mean, that's just one example of a hero in our community. There are so many other people, but those are like, Park directly has impacted and saved my life on more than one occasion. And if it wasn't for her opening the gate, then I wouldn't be able to lay a foundation for people behind me. And it wouldn't, if not for us, all of us collectively, then there would be no space for intergenerational progress. So those are my heroes.
Some pretty epic heroes, some very epic heroes. Andrew or Christopher, did you want to share in on either of you with your heroes or your inspirers?
Yeah, I think, I share the same sort of connection to drawing inspiration from the folks who are living in really isolated, really sort of, in some ways, scary for queer people parts of Montana, with very little services, with very little, if any, representation or support, and young and older organizers doing just incredible work to create community out of very little support. So there's too many to name, and I don't want to try because I don't want to leave anybody out. And for some folks, it's not safe for me to sort of be sharing their name publicly and widely. But aside from those really sort of local heroes, I lean on, the work of James Baldwin to kind of, when I'm feeling down or feeling like I need to be inspired. So many, like, thoughts, words, emotion that just sort of captures experiences that I have and continue to have, and sort of remind me that there's a lot of work to be done, and things that I'm working on now are a continuation of work that's come before, and I want to leave it in a good spot for the work that comes after. And I think on that same note, recently I've been diving back into a lot of Angela Davis, and just continue to learn and unpack a whole bunch of things that I thought I learned and unpacked in college, and then again in grad school, and then now as a campaign, really doing that work again. So for me, those are some of the folks that come to mind immediately.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you. Andrew, anybody you want to add for us to learn from and to look up to as well?
So I was going to go a bit national and historical, and actually also say James Baldwin, and part of that was really his way of speaking truth to power. And I think really want to stress that I think it's important for us not just to have representation and not just to have us enter into these places of privilege, but that we also work hard to break down the barriers that were put in front of us so that no one else has to face them. One of the things that is extremely relevant to me is that the past two mayors have actually been gay. So currently we have a lesbian white woman as mayor, and before that we had a cis white gay man. But during both of those tenures, we have seen rapid increases in terms of the amount of funding for our police department, which has been pretty shocking, in addition to really a lack of care towards our LGBTQ community as on the whole. And so in that way, really want to just make very aware for not just the people who are in this Zoom, but just thinking about in the future of running, is that it's not just enough to see yourself lifted up into that space. You then need to use that power to break down those barriers for other people. And I feel that James did a lot of that when it was extremely unpopular and could have completely killed his career.
Yes, I all of you. I hope, I mean, I'm so glad this is recorded because there are so many nuggets of like solid wisdom throughout this that I absolutely love it. Liliana, go ahead. I saw you come off mute. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, Andrew, the mayor's also recently shut down like a lot of the mental health services, haven't they? That's caused like a massive spillover of your unsheltered population into the streets also.
Yep.
Yeah. I was there and before the pandemic hit, and it was like, I thought it was bad in our city. Seattle takes it to a whole different level.
Wow.
I'm not happy. No, Tyler, you can continue.
No, like I'm just saying, no, I think what is wonderful here and what I love to see is when we understand the various things that we are all as candidates kind of working towards, and we help elevate. So thank you. I think that helps call attention to a very needed issue that needs to be called attention to. So thank you for creating space in that and just this dialogue. Being mindful of the time and knowing that we're kind of winding this down, there's always these two questions that get posed, right? And so the one that I want us to make sure that we get to is, we all know our supporters will come to us, or people will ask us, how can we help more queer candidates running for office? Or how can I help your campaign? So if you could give, we'll try, this is hard to ask candidates, but if you could give one piece of advice on how to help your campaign or other candidates, what would it be? And we'll start at this time. I'm just like keeping track. I think Christopher, I think you haven't kicked off one for a minute. So Christopher, what would that piece of advice be?
Yeah, I do get this question a lot. It's like, what can I do to help advance queer candidates at every level of policymaking, every level of leadership? And what I tell people, this is like my educator answer when I used to do a lot of education, is that really think about how are you as an individual being the kind of person that a queer person would want support from. Like doing that internal work of thinking like, am I somebody that's not only saying the words, but is actually understanding the dynamics at play here? Am I doing that internal work to be the kind of person that this queer individual would want to be on their team, would want to sort of show up for them, would be comfortable and confident and excited about spending time with and being around? So that's like an answer that I like to pose people to say, like, it's really about you taking the time look internally and say, what is it that's maybe making it challenging for you to understand how to support queer people to begin with? Because it's really not that challenging. It's really about saying, hey, I know that there's some things that I care deeply about. And so I'm going to do the work to make sure that I'm showing up in all the spaces and I'm understanding what it means to be a true and authentic ally in every space that I occupy. So that was my attempt of saying it without making it about me. But that is what I usually tell people when they ask me that question.
I think that that's great. And that was very gracious of you to not be about you, but it's totally okay to sometimes do shameless plugs. Totally okay. So Nick, Andrew, either of you want to add in something about a piece of advice here that you would give?
Yeah, I can go next. So I would say with this, how you can really support other people is to help them build capacity. Liliana talked about this earlier, but the idea that there are a lot of people who aren't able to engage in a lot of what is supposed to be public engagement, whether that be city council meetings or going to events. And so help people to build the capacity so that they're able to participate. And that's really the first step. When people are able to engage and kind of recognize how bad the system is, they want to be able to be part of that solution, find more ways to help. And the other one is self-promotion. So really, when you do things, talk about it. It feels very counterintuitive to just be like, yeah, look, I went here and I did that. But what I have really noticed is, even though I started, I would say fairly early in the cycle to really push myself and get name ID, because I currently don't have it, I've had to do a lot of explaining as to like how, yes, I actually was part of that movement, or yes, I was actually part of the group that passed that. And so definitely doing a lot of self-promotion, even though it feels weird, is what you should be doing.
Yeah, I think it's a great night. Go ahead, Nick.
Was the question about how people can help other queer candidates? Was that the question?
Yeah, and just being mindful, I guess, too, of the time that it's okay to put your plug into your. How can they help you as well?
Oh,
so that's okay.
Yeah, I was just gonna say something really is just give them your money. Give us your money. Like running for office is hard, right? And some of us are running against like really well-funded opponents. And like entrenched incumbents. And so like they have a lot of the cash already. Like my opponent started with $150,000 in the bank before I even announced that I was running for office. And so the hustle to make money and to raise money is real. And like the easier you can make it on us as candidates to raise money, the better it will be for our campaigns.
Yes, I think all of us. So if you are inspired, please chip in and help. Run for Something has given us a platform and a stage as well to hear, but we also need our constituents. We need people everywhere to kind of chip in 5, 10, 15, $100, whatever you can, because it adds up. And to get true progressive change, we've got to have the investments. And I know many of us are running grassroots level campaigns, and we don't have, like Andrew had pointed out, the big PACs that are coming in, or like Nick had said, the establishment that's already on our side, because many of us are coming in to flip and to change those systems. And so it's those little amounts that we get that really add up fast. And I totally cut off. Yes, go ahead. Liliana, go ahead.
I would say, so I really want to get Nick one of those like money guns, so that the next time he says something like that, he can just shoot off some ones or 20s if you guys donate to us. So I mean, the other thing is like other ways that you can get involved, of course, is like going to our websites, which were stated earlier in the chat. And like, for example, like for I'm sure for any of our campaigns, you can phone bank, you can text bank, you can help write postcards, you can do a number of things, anything to help us with our name ID. People have to hear or see our names 7 to 12 times before we become a person, someone to them. So those are really great ways to help get engaged. As far as like, what I would say to anybody queer who, the question, I think also Dr. Titus was also like helping other queer people run.
Yes.
The other things. I mean, everyone else has done a really awesome job of answering this question, but I think time and time again, what I've heard from people in the queer community is like their fear of the skeletons in their closet. And I think we have to really defeat this narrative of you have to be this picture perfect person, because one, all those white men up there in those really nice suits that are no, they're not perfect. They're just affluent enough to hide their mistakes. They do some down low dirty things. No. And look, the fact is that everybody is human. This idea of this fear of letting people weaponize our trauma against us and keep us from running, like there's not any, like, we have our support systems. If there's one thing that the queer community is, it's resilient, and we absolutely know how to build a community. So there's the fear of running, the fear of getting out there and being yourself. Like, I understand how intimidating that is. And we have not had people celebrate us for just being us. It's just not something we're used to. And I would say never let anybody weaponize your trauma, and never be afraid to tell your story, because it's a very powerful thing, and giving voice to it and giving light to it will only empower other people to do the same. And it also takes away the power of anybody who would use that against you. It's just by being open and telling your story and noting the power behind that. It's the time for straight, like cis white men. It's gone. Nope. It's not cute anymore. Never was. Run, take their money, take the mic. Don't be afraid.
Liliana, I like, there was so much in that, and I could see all of our heads just like, yes. But one thing that I want to just again elevate and re-highlight what you just said is so often when we are queer candidates and who've had, and especially when we possess intersectional identities, and we are traveling through life through systems that were designed to suppress and harm us, we find our ways to create and to survive and to thrive, and those can lead to stories and journeys and traumas that other people love to use against us. But they cannot speak out both sides of their mouth. I mean, they will, but they cannot both condemn us for having to survive an environment that they created for us, and then condemn us when we thrive and refuse to succumb to the traumas that they have forced upon us. And I think that you said that so much more eloquently than I did, but it's so important that we understand that many of us have journeys, and we are not defined by the things we've had to do during times of crisis to get through it. And oftentimes that builds us and helps us relate, because most of the people we will be representing have gone through similar experiences, have endured hellacious things, and need somebody to understand those journeys for them.
I know that we're over time, but something just occurred to me that I really just want to say really fast. That's okay. And I can't remember who it was that gave light to this earlier, but like, your identity is not identity politics. Like, embracing anybody that tries to tell you that by embracing you, I mean, like that by saying that you are who you are is identity politics, is just tearing you down. It's not a real thing. There's a difference between just running solely on identity politics and then being proud of your identity, putting it out there, and giving other LGBTQIA plus individuals something to relate to, and just always use it as if you're highlighted for that. Like, I was the first out queer Muslim person to run in the country in 2017. I was liberal clickbait. It was just like, I was everywhere. It was right after the Muslim ban. But every single opportunity I had, I took it, although I always took it back to platform issues. So don't let anybody tell you that because of you're telling your story, your background, your identity, that you're just trying to run on being a minority, because that's just politics, period. And they're just demonizing you telling your own story, because literally non-minority people do it all the time. So don't ever let anybody minimize you or erase you by saying that.
Well, I don't think there's any way to better wrap up Run for Something panel on up and proud and progressive candidates than what was just said. So I want to thank all of you for being here tonight, all the panelists. Like, everything that you shared was inspiring. You know, I'm a candidate myself, but I learned so much from all of you. Your stories are powerful. They speak truth into representation for so many across this nation. So thank you for stepping up. Thank you for running for something. And I will finally turn my mic off and pass it over to Liliana. So thank you all.
Thank you so much. Conversations like this are like such an important reminder for us about the important work that we're doing at Run for Something. Special thanks to Dr. Tyler Titus and all of the incredible candidates that spoke tonight. We appreciate you sharing your stories and your insight. We're so excited to be working with you, and we can't wait to see the work that you continue to do as local leaders. One of the questions as an organization that we keep coming back to is, if Run for Something didn't exist, where would the energy of amazing candidates like this go? Who would they raise their hands to? Who would be doing this work? And we're not sure of the answer, but we're more committed than ever to sustaining it. And we need your help to do so. So a few ways that you can help. The first is to run. I am directing this to anyone in the audience tonight that was inspired by our candidates, who think that their stories sound similar. We need leaders like you, so go to runforwhat.net to get started. Also, we really need your help to keep the momentum going. You can head to runforsomething.net/build to donate so that we can continue to do this work, helping amazing candidates like we heard from tonight. And special thanks to our National Host Committee, which you can join using the link that Robert's dropping in the chat right now. Joining means you'll be the first to know about our upcoming events, including the next Unapologetically Progressive event, and that link is coming now. And special thanks to our sponsors, Ask Me, Precision Strategies, Authentic Campaigns, Emily's List, Civis Analytics, Amalgamated Bank, Avalanche Insights, and NewCo. We will follow up with you all tomorrow with links on how to get involved with all of our candidates tonight and how you can support them. Happy Pride, and thanks for joining.